냐제 젬보도 닝미장 돈은 뭐는 젬보 냐게다 나그러다는 잔도 젬모 tumbato jejanla ki shomsar nishan rawar zer ngijan gamsa jawar tu jishan yalaman jime banzo jala soran gonje toban por shinji lo gonje toban por shinji lo gonje toban por shinji lo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching.
We continue with the Shurangama Sutra. Today is Saturday. Tomorrow there's no class. Monday there might not be one either, but everyone should still chant as usual in the evening. If there's no class, I'll probably let everyone know. Then, reciting the King of Aspiration prayers. One shouldn't delay everyone. Generally speaking, there should be class Monday. We'll still teach the wish-fulfilling treasury. Then we'll see how things go. Today we're teaching the analysis of the 5 aggregates in the Shurangama Sutra. In this volume it discusses the 5 aggregates. Next it will cover the 6 sense bases, 12 sense fields, and 18 elements. Each principle is explained very clearly here. In the Abhidharmakosa and Gateway to Knowledge we've studied, and other Dharma teachings, they only explain appearances. They don't, like the Shurangama Sutra, explain how all phenomena ultimately have no establishment. They lack this kind of logical analysis. So the Shurangama Sutra has some methods of analysis that are quite similar to the root stanzas of the Middle Way. The root stanzas of the Middle Way also relies on logical reasoning to make determinations. All phenomena of samsara and nirvana ultimately have no establishment, determining great emptiness. This Shurangama Sutra is also like this. The method it teaches is indeed quite similar, using logical reasoning to determine that all phenomena are empty, including our awareness. So previously we've been discussing awareness. It doesn't arise from causes and conditions. It doesn't arise naturally. It also doesn't arise from union or non-union. This principle has already been explained. Now we're analyzing the 5 aggregates. When analyzing the 5 aggregates, yesterday at the end there was a passage I wasn't very satisfied with my explanation at the time. The last part, it says, when seeing flowers again, the eyes should have no film. How can clear sky be called bright eyes? I wasn't very satisfied with my explanation of this sentence yesterday. The meaning is, if the eyes couldn't see the sky flowers at that time, then the sky flowers would become an obstruction. They would obstruct space and also obstruct the eyes. So when you see sky flowers, actually your eyes shouldn't. If you see sky flowers this way, your eyes shouldn't have obstruction. Because if your eyes had obstruction, that would certainly be unreasonable. How can clear sky be called bright eyes? If your eyes had obstruction, how could we say it's cloudless, clear sky or pure eye faculty? How could we say that? They certainly have no obstruction. If there were obstruction, how could we call it clear sky and pure eyes? Perhaps yesterday I explained this last sentence, and I myself was not very satisfied. At the time when I was teaching, it seemed I felt like I half understood. Sometimes when you're on the spot, it feels like half understanding. This situation also happens. Then after going home last night, I thought about it again. I thought, oh, this sentence today, how come when I was just teaching it, suddenly the logic seemed not quite smooth, but I just continued teaching like that because the time was almost up. So today we'll continue. Yesterday we discussed the form aggregate among form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. The form aggregate is finished. Today we analyze the sensation aggregate. Sensation means feeling. Sensation has the nature of apprehension. The Madhyamakavatara also says this. Yes, it has the nature of apprehension, the inherent nature of apprehending. Here he again uses analogies to analyze. When analyzing, each of the 5 aggregates first has a general overall analysis, then below there's detailed analysis. When analyzing each of the 5 aggregates, they use analogies. First a general analogy, then proceed with analysis. Buddha tells Ananda, for example, there is a person whose hands and feet are at ease, whose entire body is well adjusted. adjusted, suddenly forgetting life with no adverse or favorable conditions. Here it says, for example, there's a person whose hands and feet are at ease, peaceful and tranquil, no illness, no problems. Not only are his hands and feet fine, but his entire body, all his bones are also normal, nothing uncomfortable. His body is also, his entire body is good. His mental state is good, healthy and sound, no particular sensations. It's like he suddenly forgot all about existence. Sometimes when we feel quite comfortable, when the body has no problems, it feels like we don't even know where we are. Wow, once you have a headache, you feel you have a head. Once your foot hurts, oh, you discover your foot hurts. In winter when it's cold, oh, you feel your ears are particularly cold like that. So at that time he suddenly, perhaps because his body is quite healthy, quite adapted and comfortable, in this way he suddenly seems to forget everything, completely forgetting existence with no adverse or favorable conditions. His entire body and mind, their nature has nothing favorable, nothing adverse. That is to say, if favorable, then happy, particularly joyful, like that; if adverse, then unhappy, suffering like that. So he's in a relatively peaceful state, no pleasant feelings, no painful feelings. In such a state, this person for no reason rubs his two palms together in empty space. In his two hands arise illusory sensations of rough, smooth, cold and hot. It says at this time, this person for no reason at all, without cause or reason, he takes his two hands because he's just idle there. At such a time his two hands rub against each other in empty space. Sometimes we normally take two hands and rub them together, making contact. At this time, in the process of rubbing the two hands, illusion arises. A type of sensation is produced. Generally speaking, first there's contact after contact, then sensation after sensation, craving begins, etc. The sequence is like this. He, for no reason, in empty space, rubs his palms together, rubbing against each other. In the process of rubbing, because of the rubbing, sensations are produced in the hands. What are these sensations like? Here there's rough and smooth. Rough is a kind of coarse feeling, smooth is relatively smooth, slippery. Then there's also cold, hot and such, and various other characteristics. Generally when we rub our hands, perhaps in summer after a while, we feel particularly hot. We can feel this ourselves, or your hands while you're rubbing them also have a hot feeling and a smooth feeling. Sometimes when we rub the backs of our hands, it seems somewhat rough, not smooth. There's this kind of feeling at that time. You'll have these sensations. But our sensations are actually the five aggregates. Below, when briefly explained, it says, you should know the sensation aggregate is also like this. Each one has this kind of brief explanation. Then below this principle is analyzed. Ananda, these illusory touches, come neither from space nor emerge from the palms. So these illusory sensations, tactile feelings, the sensations produced from this contact, whether pleasant sensations, hot sensations, or rough sensations, or smooth sensations, these sensations are actually illusory appearances without inherent nature. They don't come from empty space because you were just rubbing in empty space. So do they come from space or do they come from the palms? We feel they either come from space or come from the palms. Besides these two, there's no other reason, because he was in a neutral state before with no particular intention to do anything. So if it has a source, either this sensation, the four types of sensation he mentions here, though other sensations are also possible, these don't come from space nor emerge from the palms. Ananda, if they came from space, since they can touch the palms, why don't they touch the body? Space shouldn't selectively come to touch, below he analyzes when analyzing. First, what faults would there be if they came from space? Then examining what faults if they came from the palms, these two analyses. If both of these have been analyzed, then your sensations indeed cannot be established. Actually, in tantric practices, searching for the mind's origin and destination, where does the mind come from? How does it rest now? Where does it finally cease? Such observations are also possible, but the method of observation here is somewhat detailed and different. He says, if you say these tactile sensations just now, whether rough sensations or smooth sensations, if they come from space, since they can touch the palms, they can make contact with the palms. If they can touch the palms, why don't they touch the body? Because space, empty space, has no place, it doesn't pervade. In that case, why does it specifically seek out your palms? In other places, including your head, including your feet, including other parts of your body, why doesn't it touch them? Space is everywhere. Why does it particularly go to your palms? Space shouldn't selectively come to touch, so space should be free and unobstructed. It pervades everywhere. If that's the case, why does it only choose your palms and not come to other places? So observing from this perspective, space itself originally has no real substance. It certainly doesn't seek out palms to come to. If it seeks out palms to come to, then there's no reason it wouldn't seek other parts of the body that reasoning doesn't hold either. Moreover, our body exists within this space, always within space, because space has the characteristic of being unobstructed. When moving like this, why does it only appear in your palms? So first, saying they come from space, this reasoning indeed doesn't hold. If they come from space, then my body, everything else is also within space. Why doesn't it touch with heat, cold, rough, and smooth? Then analyzing the second aspect, if they emerge from the palms, they shouldn't need to await joining. If you say they come from the palms, if you say they come from within the palms, then when the palms exist, the 4 types of sensations mentioned earlier should already appear. So why do they specifically need to depend on joining the palms? Because when you don't join your palms, when there's no rubbing, they don't appear. Why would they need to depend on joining palms? Because the palms exist. Moreover, since they emerge from the palms, when joined, the palms should know. When separated, the touches enter. The arms, wrists, bones, and marrow should also be aware of the traces when entering. He says if they come from within the palms, because they emerge from the palms, when you join your palms themselves should know this, because if they emerge from the palms, then the palms should be the substantial source that produces sensations. They should have this function. So when you join your palms, the palms themselves should know, oh, now hot sensations arise, cold sensations arise. They should know this. And since they emerge from the palms, then when finally separating, they should also make contact within the palms. Yesterday, we also discussed whatever they come from, they finally return there. If this is the case, then your cold and hot sensations just now all enter and exit from the palms. If they enter and exit from the palms, there are many more faults because the palms are connected with the wrists, arms, and the body's bone marrow and muscles all completely connected. In that case, these sensations from before, from arms, wrists, hand bones, and marrow should come and go among these. Then these should be aware of this kind of, oh, now it's entering from the wrist, then all the way to the arms, all the way into the bone marrow. These sensations coming and going, like some people seem to have some worm in their stomach. They can feel it wriggling just like that. You should feel its traces. Now it's in the wrist, now it's in the palm, etc. Such movements should also have these traces. Just like now we discover some patients during the pandemic, we immediately know their entire movement trajectory can also be traced. Similarly, so if they truly emerge from within the palms, then how do they emerge? When emerging, from where do they emerge? Then finally, when leaving the joined palms to return, do they go to the left hand or right hand? This should be known. Therefore, you should know the sensation aggregate is illusory. It fundamentally arises neither from causes and conditions nor from natural spontaneity. So we should understand the sensation aggregate is actually illusory. If one sees there is no experiencer, how would love not cease? This is also what Master Shantideva said. If one sees there is no experiencer, if one sees sensation is absent, how would this love not cease to exist? Because love depends on sensation to arise, and sensation depends on contact to arise, so it actually has no real nature. This should be in the Bodhisattva Karyavatara. If contact is not truly real, then how does sensation arise? If contact doesn't exist, then how could sensation arise? Why is this so? Beings are constantly chasing worldly pursuits. Why do they still painfully harm others and so forth? Wasn't this already explained later? So when we observe these sensations truly through this method, originally in the process of rubbing my hands, those sensations of cold and heat at the time, pleasure and pain, these sensations upon final observation, they don't actually come from the palms. If they came from the palms, there would be this fault. If they came from empty space, there would also be this fault. In that case, they have no substantial source. If there's no substantial source, then they're like the son of a barren woman. He has no birthplace. It's impossible for his essence to exist. So through observing in this way, we should also know that we beings every day are rushing about busily, coming and going. Pursuing what? pursuing our happiness and avoiding our suffering. But if we haven't recognized the true essence of these sensations, we're constantly bound by them. So the Abhidharmakosa also explains monastics are bound by perception, while lay people are bound by sensation. Actually now, whether monastic or lay many people, as long as they live in this world, many people are bound by sensations. This is very common. So when we study the Shurangama Sutra and understand various aspects of these teachings, regardless of what status a person has, they can all attain liberation. I've seen someone in the past called Zheng Yifu, who was a lay person. From childhood, he had particularly devout faith in Buddha. Later, he heard that Master Foyin passed away while laughing. He later felt this was very meaningful, so he traveled everywhere to study and visit masters. Later, with one Zen master, he heard the Shurangama Sutra. After hearing the Shurangama Sutra, he also studied and read it for a while. After this, he should have attained awakening. After awakening, when he was departing, I now understand the principle of life and death, meaning the principle of life and death. I understand very clearly. After saying this, he bathed and changed clothes. Then his body passed away while standing. He passed away while standing. So in the Han region, some people, not only great masters and virtuous ones among monastics, there are indeed some who, through studying the Shurangama Sutra, manifested various signs when passing away, who had already attained awakening. Moreover, among us lay people, there are also many authentic accounts who, through the Shurangama Sutra, truly attained freedom over life and death. I now understand the principle of life and death. So the principle of life and death is completely understood very freely. Life and death for him, whenever he wishes to depart, he can do so with complete mastery. So I think our sensations, actually we beings, are very pitiful, constantly rushing about for pleasant sensations, and to eliminate suffering also constantly rushing about. If we don't know the mysteries of mind, then seeking pleasure and avoiding suffering is also in vain. Everyone understands this very clearly. So learning such teachings is also very important, especially studying such principles. I see that in Khenpo Depa's commentary on the Madhyamakavatara, at the end it says, for example, studying logic, studying Vinaya, and studying the Abhisamaya Lamkara and the 5 great treatises, Abhisamaya, logic, Abhidharma, and Vinaya are very important. But among them, if you don't understand the key points of Madhyamaka, then all is in vain, meaning if you haven't realized emptiness or don't understand Prajna Paramita, thought then learning all other knowledge may not have particularly important meaning. Moreover, Madhyamaka is actually like Mount Meru, the king of mountains, like the sun and moon in space. Madhyamaka thought among all of Buddhism is also the deepest essence. Everyone should understand this. So here the Shurangama Sutra is actually fundamentally speaking from the Sutra school's perspective, using logical analysis to determine all phenomena as empty. This is the principle. We have finished analyzing the sensation aggregate. Next we will discuss form, sensation, perception. Next is analyzing the perception aggregate. When analyzing the perception aggregate, the meaning of the perception aggregate, the Madhyamakavatara says, perception means being able to take characteristics. Perception generally refers to our grasping at characteristics using consciousness to grasp. This is white, this is red, regarding the pleasant sensations just now. Oh, this is my pleasant sensation, this is my painful sensation. He grasps at certain phenomena as he grasps them in a characterized way. This is the characteristic of the perception aggregate. Below is the same method. When analyzing this perception aggregate, first there's a brief explanation, then a detailed analysis. In the brief explanation, Buddha says to Ananda, for example, there is someone who talks about sour plums and water flows from his mouth. He thinks of treading on a precipice and his soles feel sour and rough. This is also an analogy. For example, there's a person who talks about it, someone else mentions it. What do they mention? Sour plums. Sour plums are quite sour and sweet. Many of us should know this. Sour plums are quite sour and sweet, a kind of fruit, such sour plums. You should try eating some yourselves later. After studying the Shurangama Sutra, see if our sour plums sell well too. These sour plums, when others mention them like this, the listener immediately has a certain feeling. People generally have many physiological conditioned reflexes. For example, when talking about particularly sour things while talking about it, finally everyone feels somewhat sour. Then when thirsty, constantly talking about delicious food, immediately one also wants to eat. Saliva in the mouth begins to flow, wanting to eat like this. Similarly, after others speak, one thinks of treading on a precipice of 10,000 jang, particularly steep precipices. Then your souls also have a kind of sourness and roughness, fear, a feeling of terror. This indeed happens. I once went, probably when I was in my 20s, to a monastery in Maerkang County, Aba State. In their surroundings, we often had to go out. When going out, we had to ride horses. When riding horses, sometimes there's a river below above. There's a narrow path on the precipice. Then walking on horseback on this path, those local people, including the horses at that time, they were already accustomed to it. Then on those stone slabs, when the horse's hooves made contact, clip-clop, clip-clop. Then when riding that horse, I was extremely, extremely afraid, as if truly both person and horse would fall below, because below you couldn't see anything at all. You could only see the river, a narrow path on the precipice above the river. Then when reaching the destination, thinking back on it, I was still particularly afraid. Just like some of us also often experience those walkways nowadays, if the bottom is also made of glass, many people are also particularly afraid. So the meaning is actually hearing the sound of sour plums just now also causes saliva to flow. Or when hearing about precipices of 10,000 jang, the souls feel somewhat sour and rough, this feeling of fear. This also exists, everyone knows this. In the Han region, there's something called looking at plums to quench thirst. In the past, during the Three Kingdoms period, Cao Cao, when he was leading an army of 10,000 soldiers to war, they had walked very, very far on the road. Later, their food and drink were completely gone. Many people were about to collapse, unable to continue forward. At this time, he began to say, "Everyone hurry up. Ahead of us, there's a plum grove, a forest of sour plums. We'll reach it soon." At this time, although they might not have arrived yet, but everyone, upon thinking of this, many soldiers' mouths began to naturally produce saliva. Then they naturally quenched their thirst and finally reached their destination. There's such an account. In this way, it's actually true. Our perception is also like this, the perception aggregate. The two cases just mentioned, one is when hearing the sound of sour plums, the saliva that flows is also actually without coming or going, and that feeling of sourness and roughness just now, this is perception. The previous was sensation. Their aspects are different. So all perception aggregates are also like this. How is this so? Below the analysis begins. It says, Ananda, such sour talk comes neither from the plums nor enters from the mouth. When we analyze below, you just felt saliva flowing. So what is the source of this? Does it arise from the plums or does it arise from within the mouth? There are only these two paths, no others. It's just this sound that was heard, but sound also doesn't have this function. When actually observing, it doesn't arise from the plums, nor does it enter from the mouth. How is this so? Ananda, if they arose from the plums should speak of themselves. Why wait for a person to speak? If you say the saliva flow just now actually isn't produced by other conditions, but only arises from the plums. If it arises from the plums, then the plums have the ability to produce saliva. In that case, the plums combining with themselves should speak of themselves, because if it arises from within them, they themselves speaking would be sufficient. Why listen to others, depend on others to speak? This isn't necessary, because if it arises from the plums, arising from within the plums, they should speak themselves. Now I'm about to appear. Who wants to eat me? The plums speaking for themselves would be fine. Why do other people speak here? There's no reason for this. Why should others speak? Because this arises from the plums. If it arises from the plums, then when others speak, what's the relationship between them? This is also unreasonable if they entered from the mouth. If it's not that the plums produced it, it's not that saliva flows from within the mouth just now. In that case, if it arises from within the mouth, it should hear with its own mouth. Why need to wait for ears? If it arises from within his own mouth, then his lips and tongue, the mouth itself, should hear this sound. Why must the ears transmit it? This also has no connection because the ears are the ear faculty, completely unrelated to the mouth. If it arises from within the mouth because this water arises from within the mouth itself should be able to hear it. It shouldn't use ears to transmit. If only the ears heard, why doesn't this water flow from the ears? If you say it's not that the mouth heard it, but that the ears heard it. If the ears heard it, then why doesn't this water flow from the ears? Why does it specifically flow from the mouth? So actually, when observing here, we might find direct refutation a bit difficult, but actually dependent origination is just like this. In conventional reality, when unexamined, as long as conditions are sufficient, it can appear. But these conditions are actually also empty without substantial reality. So Ananda always thinks there's something substantially real. If there's something substantially real, then such characteristics at that time here, where continuously just now saliva flowed, he mentally grasps a certain characteristic. So where does this characteristic come from? Similarly, thinking of treading on precipices is similar to the speaking. That precipice of 10,000 zhang, just now the feeling of sourness, very afraid. The feeling of sourness in the souls can also be reasoned through the observation of water flowing from the mouth. In commentaries like that of Changshui Zixuan, the observation is also the same, this sourness we experience. Does it arise from the precipice or arise from the souls? If it arises from the precipice, then why can't the precipice itself hear this fearful situation? Why must there be a person to speak of it? Because it arises from the precipice itself has a relationship to it. If it doesn't arise from the precipice but arises from the feet, if it arises from the feet, then why can the souls discover hearing about the terror of this precipice? It's not like this. So why does the mind think about it, or after others speak, one contemplates it oneself, then begins to have the feeling of sourness? This is also unreasonable. So through observing in this way, it's actually not established. Therefore, you should know the perception aggregate is illusory. It fundamentally arises neither from causes and conditions nor from natural spontaneity. So through the above observations, the perception aggregate is actually illusory. Indeed, it's not established. It doesn't truly arise from causes and conditions. It doesn't arise naturally. It doesn't arise in these ways. As the Lankavatara Sutra says, when mind arises, various things arise. When mind ceases, various things cease. Beings, through false discrimination, see objects where there are no objects. Beings, false discrimination, seeing objects where there are no objects. The principle explained there is completely the same. All people in this world who grasp, whether it's people or characteristics, salivating or wanting to eat candy, wanting to eat chocolate or wanting to listen to music or looking at beautiful forms in the world or being able to touch very soft things, all these things we grasp at, all of these on the surface seem to arise from two types of phenomena, but actually if we observe from their essence or observe from their source, these phenomena are not established. In this way, our perception aggregate indeed, its essence is unattainable. We've now discussed form, sensation, and perception. The third aggregate among the five aggregates is now finished. Next, we'll discuss the formation aggregate. Regarding the formation aggregate, everyone should know, Master Chandrakirti says, formation is what can create. The formation aggregate is mainly about creating. Creating might not be particularly clear. The Abhidharmakosa says all conditioned phenomena except the four aggregates are called the formation aggregate. In the Gateway to Knowledge, the formation aggregate has two aspects. One is the formation aggregate associated with mind formation, aggregate associated with mind formation, aggregate associated with mind. Like the 51 mental factors, these all belong to the formation aggregate, and there are non-associated formations. In the Abhidharmakosa, there are 14 things like acquisition, life, and so forth. In the Mahayana Abhidharma, they add 10 more, making 24 in total. All non-associated formations in upper and lower Abhidharma total 24 types. Actually, these non-associated formations are all processes. For example, acquisition. This process of acquisition is considered a phenomenon because it can't be called a sentient phenomenon, nor can it be called an insentient phenomenon, or it's not included in other categories of phenomena, but it is indeed a conditioned phenomenon. After this, generally formation can refer to phenomena other than the 5 aggregates. Sometimes this formation, all phenomena also, all formations are impermanent, all formations are suffering. At this time, all phenomena also have this meaning. So this formation is actually a process, also a stage called the formation aggregate. I don't know how well this explanation is. This also has a brief and detailed analysis. First, in the brief explanation, Buddha tells Ananda, like a rapid torrent, waves follow continuously. The earlier and later boundaries don't overtake each other. He says, for example, there's a rapid torrent, a waterfall. Everyone knows this. In particularly steep mountain places, water forms this kind of rapid torrent. This torrent's spray and waves continue without interruption. This continuity, actually, the earlier and later boundaries don't overtake each other. It's not that the front waves run to the back waves, or back waves catch up to front waves. It's not like this. This water naturally has its own pattern. The entire up, down, front and back don't get confused. It should be particularly orderly, not overtaking. We all know this. For example, when going somewhere, the torrents or cascades by the roadside, everyone knows their flowing water still follows patterns. It's not like when we people sometimes overtake when happy, constantly overtaking when unhappy, following behind a tractor, driving slowly. It's not like this. The entire torrent has order. This process is called formation. You should know the formation aggregate is also like this. Actually, the formation aggregate is also like this. The pattern of its entire process is also like this. Actually, it appears to have some existence, but it has its own pattern. Below, we analyze. Earlier, it seemed like everything has a certain order. The formation aggregate is also like this. It's a little different from the previous brief explanations. However, he doesn't completely analyze here. It's like a conventional approach. Because when he briefly explains, he just shows this issue to everyone. Below, the analysis begins. Apparently, the formation aggregate is also like this. Apparently, the previous perception aggregate is also like this. The sensation aggregate is also like this. The form aggregate is also like this. But when we truly observe below, it's also not established. Then Buddha tells Ananda, such flowing nature doesn't arise from space, doesn't exist because of water. It's neither water's nature nor separate from space and water. This is a bit different. The previous ones basically resolved from 2 aspects, refuted from 2 aspects. This one has 4 aspects. He says such torrent, this flowing nature of water, actually the waterfall cannot be established from 4 aspects of analysis. How can it not be established? It doesn't arise from space, nor does it arise because of water, nor does it arise as non-water, and it doesn't arise separate from water and space, observing from these 4 aspects. Actually, the torrent is not established. How is it not established? Below the continued analysis begins, Ananda, if it arose from space, then all endless space in the 10 directions would become endless flow. The worlds would naturally all suffer drowning. He says, if you say this torrent earlier was in empty space, because sometimes when we see torrents, they still have some relationship with space, so maybe it arises from space. Actually, it's not like this. If it arises from empty space, then all endless space in the 10 directions. Everywhere there's no place, space doesn't pervade nowhere. In the 10 directions, east, south, west, north, wherever you go, there's none. In that case, if it arises from space, then all space in the 10 directions would become this flow, because if it arises within it, there would certainly be torrents within it. So space in the 10 directions would all become torrents in the 10 directions. If this were so, the entire world would naturally be completely swallowed up. Water, land, and air would all be impossible to establish, because you say torrents arise from empty space and space is everywhere. If all space becomes torrents, where would our world be? Where would there be earth? Where would there be mountains, rivers, and great earth? Everything would be submerged by it. Finally, humanity would face the end of the world. All would be drowned, already swallowed up. This certainly can't be admitted. The source of torrents being space certainly can't be said. Actually, some of these reasoning methods here are quite interesting. Whether everyone is debating or tutoring each other, you should also study like this yourself. I think studying the Shurangama Sutra should make many people become intelligent. Also, if we frequently read these classical texts, perhaps our Chinese language level will also be a little better. I originally found reading Chinese very difficult, but these few years, reading the Vimalakirti Sutra, Lotus Sutra, reading these is a little better than before for myself. Of course, better isn't much better. When approaching 20 years old, I first started reading Pinyin as a cowherd boy. Becoming good is impossible. But indeed, if we continuously study, if you understand the Shurangama Sutra, the principles in this classical Chinese relatively well, other sutras might be easier to read because his literary style is quite distinctive. So his reasoning earlier, if it arises from empty space, then the worlds in 10 directions would all be submerged. Sometimes when we debate, it's also not necessary to speak only about this. You can debate using other methods. Oh, does a certain phenomenon arise from this? If it arises, does it arise from itself or arise from empty space? If it arises from empty space, then such and such. You can debate like this too. This is the first aspect. The second aspect, if because water exists, this torrent, because it has water as a prior cause, if it arises because of this, then this torrent's nature should not be water. His observation here is also somewhat a bit different from before. So Buddha's method of debate, when slightly different, he immediately transforms, switches to another approach. He said earlier, if it arises from empty space, then space encompasses everything. So if it arises from water, then the reasoning method is different. He says, then this torrent, its nature shouldn't be water. Why shouldn't it be water? Because it arises from water. If it arises from water, then water is the cause and torrent is the effect. In that case, cause and effect are not one entity. As it says in the Shurangama commentary with palm annotations, water is like a father and the torrent is like a son. A father gives birth to a son. It's impossible for a father to give birth to a father. If its cause is water, then the torrent's nature shouldn't be water. Everyone might need to look at this a bit. The logic is a bit different from before. If that's the case, possessor and possessed should be manifestly present now. If you say the torrent's cause is water, but the torrent itself is not water, then this statement is certainly unreasonable. He says possessor and possessed should be manifestly present now. What does this mean? Possessor refers to one is possessor. Possessor and possessed possessor is the one who possesses. Referring to water possessed refers to the torrent. That is to say, water and torrent should exist as one taste, one entity. This is what we perceive directly. If this sentence is explained, it also says this. If you say the torrent's essence is it arises from water, then it shouldn't. If it arises from water, then it's like son and father not being one entity. Then this torrent should become non-water. But in reality, actually water and torrent we perceive directly. They are inseparable. This is the meaning. Possessor and possessed. Possessor and possessed, one is place and one is possessed. Possessor and possessed seems like one is possessor and possessed, right? The earlier possessor is the one who possesses, referring to water. Possessed refers to the torrent. So the characteristics of the possessor and the possessed actually presently exist as direct perception. The two are inseparable. It should be like this. Seems like in Tibetan the explanation method is slightly different, but most commentaries explain it this way. Everyone should remember this. This is the second type of observation method. The principle that this torrent arising from water is unreasonable. Then if it doesn't arise from water, then is the torrent just water? Is this reasonable? This is also unreasonable. If it's the nature of water itself, if the torrent's essence is water's nature, the flowing torrent's nature just now is water's nature. Oh, this is also wrong. How is it wrong? Then when clear and still, it should not be water's body. If it's flowing and moving, this is water's nature. Then, when this water is clear and still, when water is quiet, it doesn't flow like this when it becomes still. At that time, it should not be water's essence. Why? Because you just said the torrent is water's nature. If water's nature is torrent, then when water is clear and still, it should not be a torrent anymore. Why? Because what you admitted just now is water's nature is torrent, torrent's nature is water. In that case, this is completely like nitpicking in our logic. Sometimes just a slight word can be debated like this with him, but if you say the torrent's flowing nature is water, then when water is still, it's not water anymore. There's this fault. This is the third aspect of refutation. Then the fourth aspect, if separate from space and water, if you say separate from space and also separate from water, this torrent, because earlier we can't say water's nature, can't say space's nature. In that case, I have one last choice. It's already separate from space, separate from water. The torrent is like this. In that case, this also doesn't work. Space has no outside, water has no external flow. That doesn't work. In that case, there's no place, space doesn't pervade. Then if there's a torrent separate from space, it seems like it doesn't depend on space in this world. This should not exist. All phenomena exist in space. So space has no outside. This also doesn't exist. Then water has no external flow. Besides this water, if you want to establish a torrent, this is also impossible to establish. So what should we do? You see, just now we said arising from space doesn't work, arising from water doesn't work, separate from water doesn't work, separate from space doesn't work. So what is it like? Oh, this is the inconceivability of cause and effect. In appearance, as long as conditions are sufficient, it has no logic, it's natural principle, naturally depending on these. For example, between seed and fruit contact is wrong, non-contact is also wrong. But as long as conditions are sufficient, it will manifest as appearing yet without inherent nature. When you truly examine it, it can't withstand any examination. In this way, in the entire range of knowables, there's nothing substantially real. The reason is like this. Therefore, you should know the formation aggregate is illusory. It fundamentally arises neither from causes and conditions nor from natural spontaneity. So we should understand all formation aggregates are actually like the waterfall we just discussed. Then we should know it doesn't arise naturally, nor does it arise from causes and conditions. Actually, these analogies are very interesting. For people with relatively good memory, frequently thinking about this waterfall, oh, this represents the formation aggregate. Then the sour plum, oh, this is just now, was the representation of the formation aggregate. Then this represents the perception aggregate. Then our hand rubbing represents the sensation aggregate. Yesterday, when we discussed form, everyone also knows the eyes seeing these sky flowers in empty space. This represents the form aggregate. Actually, in real life, these aren't very distant things. Each of us frequently lives among these lives in the natural world. We can also see some various sour fruits, yogurt. These can also be seen. Then when we press our eyes, sky flowers can also be seen, or continuously staring into empty space. Sky flowers can also be seen. Then when rubbing hands, these feelings we have. Many of us who do massage continuously rubbing like this, finally their own hands also become particularly hot. Then on other people's bodies, when vigorously rubbing like this, it also generates heat. But this kind of heat, if people without practice, might not matter. It's just ordinary. If people with practice, they will use this to meditate. Just like when worldly people pass by, there are various plants by the roadside, they won't consider them useful. If it's a skilled doctor, every plant and tree he sees, this treats this disease, this treats that disease, he will wholeheartedly use them to gather medicine. So practice is also like this. We've finished discussing sensation, perception, and formation. Next, we discuss the last aggregate, consciousness, the last aggregate among the 5 aggregates. This is also like this, regarding the consciousness aggregate. For example, someone takes a Kalasha pitcher, plugs its 2 holes, fills it with empty space. Here he gives an analogy. The consciousness aggregate is like empty space, using this analogy. How is this so? Our human consciousness, everyone knows every being has eye, ear, nose, tongue, body consciousness. This consciousness, actually compared to empty space, can be compared in many ways. For example, there's a person who takes what's called a kalasha picture. Isn't there the Kalavinka in the Amitabha Sutra? There's a bird, one body with two heads. That Jivam Jivaka bird, just like this picture, is also called, possibly, this shape is somewhat similar to it, one body with two heads. So this is a picture because it has two heads. Possibly also different consciousnesses can enter. So if there's a picture, this kind of kalasha picture, this kalasha picture's openings above all have two openings. These two openings, plug them up. After plugging them up, what's inside? All empty space. Our picture represents the body, then the space inside means consciousness. This picture is filled with empty space. Then the lid of this picture has already been plugged up, already sealed. Well, after sealing, travels 1,000 li afar to offer to another country. After filling it with empty space, traveling 1,000 li very far away, then giving this empty space to here, offering or presenting to another different country. We feel like this kind of feeling, filling a pitcher completely full with empty space, then traveling to a very distant place, sending it to another country. I don't know what this is trying to say. There might be this feeling. Moreover, if filling with empty space, actually filling empty space, many of us, because of current textbook materials and such reasons regarding empty space, sometimes we frequently do experiments, chemistry experiments. Either the bottle has oxygen or carbon dioxide, treating this as empty space. Actually, it's not empty space, it's just things we can't see. Actually, inside there is a kind of substance, so-called empty space, besides oxygen or carbon dioxide. All dust absent, completely this kind of emptiness is called empty space. In that case, whether you fill a bottle with empty space or not, actually there's no difference. Actually, the consciousness aggregate is also like this. You should know the consciousness aggregate is also like this. How is this analyzed below? Buddha tells Ananda, such empty space comes neither from that place nor enters from this place. He says that empty space just now packed in, for example, if we pack a bottle of empty space from Lhasa, then come to Larungar. When coming to Larungar, actually it's not packed empty space from Lhasa and brought here, nor is it that from Larungar this empty space was put into that bottle just now. The initial meaning should be like this. It doesn't come from that place, nor does it enter empty space from this place. It's not brought from that place, nor is it from this place that empty space was filled in again. It's not like this. When analyzing below, Ananda, if it came from that place, then originally in the bottle, having stored space and taken it away at the original bottle's location, there should be less empty space. If from Lhasa we packed a bottle of empty space and brought it then from the Lhasa side, taking one bottle from all the empty space, then storing it in this bottle, storing it in this empty space inside our bottle. In this way, at the original bottle's location, the original empty space at the bottle's location should be reduced by one part. Reduced by what? Originally, Lhasa had 100 million bottles worth of empty space. If we took one bottle now, there wouldn't be 100 million. It should be 99,999,999. So on their side, this empty space should be reduced by one bottle. But actually, is there this concept? Impossible. The empty space in Lhasa, although I took away a big bottle of empty space. Now, isn't it that they take air from the Himalayas? Something from the Himalayas. These are packed in bottles. Then Japan and Australia, oxygen or some gases from there, also packed in bottles, saying this is imported, this is from high altitude, how good for the body, how good for nutrition, some mineral water. This is a water drop from so many tens of thousands of years ago. Then this sells for how much money? Those wealthy bosses, actually, I worry whether it might be current because we don't have any verification. Many say verification, whether it's real or fake, is hard to say. So now indeed empty space from Lhasa, or packing a bottle from Himalayan empty space, then bringing it down to sell. Ah, there's empty space inside if you buy it. One bottle costs 30,000 yuan. In that case, yes, I'll open it here. Oh, yes, this empty space here is so fresh. It might be like this, but actually there's no such thing. Reducing the empty space above by one is also impossible. Packing one bottle from the empty space above. This concept is also very strange. So from this empty space coming from a distant place and packing it here, the reasoning is not established. If from this place entering, opening the hole and turning the bottle upside down should see space coming out, then this explanation by Chang Shui is acceptable. When I look at other places, some are a bit incomprehensible. If we say it's not that we just took a bottle of empty space, that side would have to decrease. So this is unreasonable. If from this place entering, if you say it's not from a distant place but our empty space here entering in, then this is also unreasonable. How is it unreasonable? Opening the hole and turning the bottle upside down. Because the empty space brought from over there when it arrives here, we open this bottle mouth, then at this time the original empty space has to be poured out. When pouring, if empty space has substance, then you should be able to see it being poured out. Then after it's poured out, only then do I have a chance to fill in the empty space from here. Some commentaries seem to be like this, because here it says, if from this place entering, if the empty space from our side here wants to enter that side, then the empty space from that side after arriving here is just like when we take a bus from over there came then, after it arrives, all those people get off. We know that after all these people have gotten off, then people from our side start getting on the bus, getting on the public bus like that. So at that time there should be discovery, but there's no discovery of empty space from over there pouring out and empty space from our side entering in. So in this way, indeed, also the so-called consciousness aggregate also cannot be established. Actually, consciousness is also like this. For example, in this lifetime, I think I have this kind of consciousness. But if this lifetime transfers to the next lifetime, the entire process in between is like empty space from one place transferring to another place. The essence of consciousness, if you directly say there's a substantial thing transferring around this, is also unreasonable. Actually, if speaking like this here, our Tathagata Garbha, Alaya Vijnana, many principles can gradually be deepened. Therefore, you should know the consciousness aggregate is illusory. It fundamentally arises neither from causes and conditions nor from natural spontaneity. So we should know all consciousness aggregates are also illusory. They don't arise from causes and conditions, nor do they arise naturally. Above, we have discussed the 5 aggregates. Actually, these 5 aggregates are indeed worth our observation. When Buddha turned the first wheel of Dharma, the 5 aggregates truly exist. Then in the second turning of the wheel, seeing that the 5 aggregates are all empty, everyone knows this. Then in the third turning and in Tantra, the nature of the 5 aggregates is like the 5 Tathagatas. This principle is very important. Generally in the Shravakayana, that is, when discussing the Ekotara Agama, it also says, form is like foam, feeling is like bubbles, perception is like a mirage, formations like a banana tree, consciousness is an illusory phenomenon. The Samyukta Agama also says this. There's also another called the 5 Aggregates Parable Sutra, a short sutra translated by Anshi Gao. In this sutra at the beginning he adds to each one, for example, observing form like foam, sensation like bubbles on water. He has 5 characters to translate. But regardless, when we study Madhyamaka, if we actually truly understand the 5 aggregates, then at that time truly the principle that the 5 aggregates are all empty. Then in Tantra, just as the Guhyagarbha Tantra also says, the Vajra aggregate branches are commonly called the 5 perfect awakenings. The branches of the Vajra aggregate, the essence of the Vajra aggregate, are actually commonly called the 5 great Tathagatas, the 5 families of Tathagatas. So when we reach Tantra, we don't determine like this. All 5 aggregates are actually the 5 Tathagatas. Those who have studied the Guhyagarbha Tantra, everyone knows this. So when we study such sutras, we should understand its true meaning layer by layer. This is very important. So what we've discussed above the 2nd volume is now finished. Generally speaking, the 1st and 2nd volumes of the Shurangama Sutra are often relatively difficult to get through. After getting through this, what follows will be relatively smooth.
Bandharangara Padma Sada Om Bandara Padma Sada